On today's episode of the Wild Party Podcast, I'm joined by Emily Guice, Assistant Manager of Corporate Responsibility at People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, aka PETA. Emily's journey began like so many of ours, loving animals at home while not yet realizing the suffering behind our everyday choices. That awareness transformed her into a powerful advocate who now works with major global corporations to eliminate animal use from their supply chains. We talk about how change happens from the inside out, from ending dairy upcharges at coffee chains to helping airlines and travel companies remove animal exploitation from their offerings. Emily also shares insight into how consumer demand drives progress, the emotional side of the animal industry, and why veganism is about more than food. It's a movement for compassion across every industry. Let's get the party started. Welcome to the Wild Party Podcast, where we celebrate the visionaries behind vegan, ethical, and sustainable business. In each episode, we'll dive deep into their journeys, uncovering the why behind their mission-driven business. I'm your host, Stephanie Lahart. Tune in with me for passionate discussions about overcoming challenges, innovative marketing strategies, and the power of using business as a force for good. So whether you're an entrepreneur seeking guidance or a conscious consumer wanting to support impactful brands, join us as we explore the stories behind the businesses that are changing the world for the better. Let's get the party started. I am so excited today because my guest is Emily Guice, and Emily is the Assistant Manager of Corporate Responsibility at People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which we know as PETA. Emily partners with major corporations to help them eliminate animal use from their supply chains and replace old systems with innovative, compassionate solutions. Now, from the foods we eat to the entertainment we watch, her work is helping to create a future where kindness drives business decisions. So, Emily, thank you so much for being on the show. We are going to have a great conversation.
Stephanie, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, you nailed it right on the head. So many people don't ask questions about where things come from. And honestly, I was guilty of that myself. I mean, I think for a lot of people, my love for animals started at home. My parents had a dog that they adopted years before I was born, Marley. She was like a big sister. She protected us from every perceived threat, like the mailman. She was super strong-willed. She even had this bedtime routine where she, made sure we all complied. And later on, we added Lexi to the family, and she was in some ways like the polar opposite, super sweet, super docile, super pleasing, like go with the flow. As long as she had her tennis ball, she was good. I grew this love for dogs and cats growing up, but I was completely disconnected from the way that animals ended up on my plate. I did not grow up vegan. I did not grow up vegetarian. And it really wasn't until I was in college that I came across a vegetarian group that taught me about factory farms and that animals like pigs, chickens, sheep, that can feel pain, they can feel suffering, they also can feel joy in the same way that the animals who share our homes can, that they were violently killed for food, for the clothing that we wear, for the products that we buy. And so it was really this like full circle moment where I was like, okay, I need to start thinking critically about this. And I ended up writing my undergraduate thesis on the dairy industry. And that was totally sparked like out of the blue by an Instagram video that I came across where I'd seen that these mother cows were hooked up to these industrial style milking machines, that they cried after their babies were torn away from them, and that they went through these constant cycles of lactation and pregnancy. And so when I learned that, I was like, okay, 200 animals are saved every year just by going vegan. I was like, how could I not go vegan? And it's been a crazy journey ever since.
Definitely has been. And I had mentioned, I actually turned to vegetarianism when I was 16. I was introduced to PETA by a friend in high school who had somehow become aware of them. And she gave me magazines because, by the way, this was back in the 80s. So there was no social media. So I had the print magazines and I saw what was going on in the labs where they were doing testing on animals. And I was like, this is horrific. And I remember looking around and being like, adults know about this. Why is this okay? So, that really started my journey. And, I lived most of my life as a vegetarian because I didn't understand at that point the abuses in the dairy industry, which thank God now with social media, I've been now vegan for the last 10 years because I became aware of actually how much more horrific the dairy industry is than anything. Like I thought, oh, I'm not eating a steak, but the dairy cows are fine because we have this marketing now where dairy cows live on these farms and they're so happy, right? They're happy cows, especially if they come from California, apparently. And that's all a lie. The whole thing's a lying. Like when you learn, you're like, oh my God, how is this still allowed to exist? So, part of the reason I even started this podcast is that I wanted to give voice to the companies that were out there that were willing to try the hard work of doing something different, whether it be starting companies that were ethical and sustainable and vegan, or really bringing to awareness, like PETA is, that, what, this happens. This is what it takes to get that animal, let's say, from the farm to your plate. It's not a happy ride. Wool is not a nice industry. I mean, that was another eye opener for me. So, there's a struggle there in the disconnect of what we know and what we think we know. So you actually work with corporations now to change their systems and to change how they're doing things. And we know that can be difficult because, they have profits over anything. So one of the things we've heard in the news a lot this year is about getting these coffee shops like Starbucks, and other restaurants, let's say, to stop with the vegan tax, which anything that was vegan or not animal based, we suddenly got a 50 cent to 75-cent upcharge on it. And I know you've really been working on those initiatives. So what did that look like to really be start educating these companies like you don't need to do that and you're actually turning customers off?
Yeah, so PETA does a lot of work with corporations. And so part of that work is engaging with the food industry. And sometimes it looks like introducing new vegan products, but it also looks like working with companies to make the vegan products that they already have more accessible and affordable. So it's been several years now that coffee industries have vegan milk, like almond milk, oat milk. It's fairly mainstream. You basically can't go to a coffee shop these days without running into a vegan milk. But like you said, there were these crazy upcharges that were 50 cents to over $1 that consumers were having to pay for an 8-ounce latte. And we found out that a lot of these coffee shops were actually facing class action lawsuits, alleging that they were using discriminatory practices. Um, against people who are lactose intolerant. And many of these suits also claimed that these companies were profiting millions of dollars over these surcharges. Because you think about it, the dairy industry, it is subsidized by the government, so it is a little bit cheaper. But the cost difference in an 8-ounce latte does not amount to over $1 that consumers were paying. So it was absolutely ridiculous. But part of the thing that we do with companies and say, hey, okay, we understand, you've got a front line, but also customers want to feel welcomed when they come into your stores. They don't want to feel penalized for choosing options that align with their needs and their values. And there are quite literally millions of Americans who are lactose intolerant, who are allergic to dairy, who avoid dairy for ethical, climate, religious reasons. And they are currently having to pay these crazy excessive fees. And so we launched a massive campaign against Starbucks. We had so much public engagement. We had celebrity engagement. James Cromwell even glued his hand to a Starbucks counter to raise media attention. It was wonderful. But yeah, so Starbucks had a new CEO that started in 2024, late fall, and he listened. He said, okay, I hear you. And he made this decision to drop the upcharge. And we see this a lot with companies when a major industry leader leads the way, it kind of becomes a domino effect. So quite literally, within the next like couple of months, Dunkin' made the change, Dutch Bros made the change, Pete's Coffee made the change, Tim Hortons, and the list goes on. So it was really, really exciting to see. It was a huge win for cows and for customers alike.
It is, and it did make me so happy because I'm in Los Angeles, which is like the land of oat milk, if you ask me. And even in our little tiny coffee shops around here, they had this surcharge. And then suddenly, you're right, when Starbucks dropped it, it just silently disappeared. Like I don't look at menus anymore and see that surcharge of 50 cents to 75 cents or whatever more. And the other thing that was always hard about that for me is when I would see that surcharge, it made me feel awful because I was like, why is milk so cheap? Because the amount of massive factory farming we had makes their lives and their milk product worth so little. Like, right? Like in my heart, I would be like, you know what? If you were going to charge me $100 for milk, like a cup of milk, then I would say, well, at least you're honoring the animal. But to devalue them to the point of you matter so little that your product is so cheap that anything other than this product gets an upcharge, that was like felt bad for me. So I like that, and I think that other people are seeing that too, that they're like starting to question like, why is this stuff so cheap? Why are like these massive chicken chains that are out there, which I will not even mention their name to give them any free press. Why is it that you can go in there and buy a meal for $3? Did you ever think about that? How bad, like how little, like I mean, I don't even know how to say it, like how little value is in what you're putting in your body. And I think that that is something Pete has been really good at like exposing too. Social media has been great for that. Like we're learning about the dairy industry, we're learning about the meat industry, we're learning about the wool industry. And for me, something that was really eye-opening too was to see the work that Pete has done as far as giving those replacements to companies, like you said, like especially in the beauty industry, they're like, you don't have to do this testing. We've developed new tests and this is better. And then the beauty industry is like, great, it's actually cheaper for us to do it that way. We'll do it that way. So I love that Peter's on the forefront like that. So let's talk a little bit about like the travel industry right now, because travel had this huge moment because of social media. Everybody's worldwide. Everybody wants to be doing all the Instagrammable things. And a lot of that had to do with these, what we call these animal experiences. So, talk to me a little bit about what that looks like now as far as getting things like the pyramids at Gaza to not be using camels. How does that first conversation happen? Because, there's not just one person that makes that decision.
No, there's not. And, we have started working with travel companies, so like the booking sites, the tour operators years ago. We were putting out tons of public campaigns about how wild animals in particular suffer in the tourism industry for things like elephant rides, for marine parks. And there's these very common themes that we see where wild animals are, say, poached from the wild. They live lifetimes in confinement that are just like a tiny fraction of their natural environments. Many of them start to exhibit really neurotic behaviors like self-mutilation, or they will pace back and forth. And premature death is also really, really common in these industries. And so, like you said, a lot of it is the education side. And so we started to use social media more and more to try to get public awareness. But actually, we found that engaging with companies directly was a really powerful first step. Because think about it, a lot of these companies are international. So when they make a decision, it impacts every single market that they operate in. So you're not having to like pass legislative action in one country and it just impact that jurisdiction. When they make a change, boom, you have international exposure. So we were really excited about this corporate momentum. And it started really back in 2016 when we were working with TripAdvisor. They put out this first of its kind animal welfare policy that did the revolutionary work. It banned elephant rides, it banned swim with dolphin programs, it banned circuses. The list goes on. And it was that same domino effect that we saw with Starbucks, where you say, okay, here's an industry leader. And very quickly, Booking.com created an animal welfare policy, Expedia created an animal welfare policy, Airbnb created an animal welfare policy. And it was really something that created protections for both people and animals alike, because PETA hears all the time from people who were injured, they were hospitalized, they were even killed during interactions with wild animals, including things like elephant bathing, which a lot of people realized elephant rides were bad. They didn't realize how reckless elephant bathing was. And it's actually, they undergo the exact same abusive training that the elephants used for rides do, where, they are taken from their mothers as babies. They are violently whipped, they are restrained just to break their spirit. It's a really violent process because wild animals naturally avoid humans. And so to get them to comply with these unnatural interactions, it requires breaking their spirit. So that's kind of where the work started. And that was a huge momentum in like the 2010s, I would say. And more recently, PETA has been doing a lot of work to expose the cruelty that domesticated animals experience. So PETA Asia has been putting out investigations since 2019 about camels and horses who are used for tourist rides at the Giza Pyramid Complex in Egypt. And what multiple undercover exposés have shown is that these animals are forced to work in the grueling heat without basic necessities. They're going without food, without adequate water, without access to vet care. Many of these animals are incredibly emaciated. And in fact, many are being just completely discarded to die on the side of the road like trash. It is heartbreaking. You see videos of flies eating out their eyes. It's terrible. And so we had tried to work with the government there for a long time to create change, but meaningful progress was not happening. And so what we did is we had these corporate contacts from years prior at these travel companies, and we went back to them and we said, hey, look, you took action for wild animals. Domesticated animals are suffering in the exact same way here. This is an extremely egregious example. Please act. And you know what? They did. Airbnb took action, Marriott took action, and they joined a list of over 50 travel companies that decided to cut animal rides at this site. And it created change. We're already hearing that a new electric bus system is rolling out at the site, which could help replace the animal rides that are taking place there, which is just, I mean, that's something we've been pushing for years. And finally, because at the end of the day, it's the bottom line, it's that money. And so companies are starting to take action, and the government and the people on that site are taking notice. So it's just really inspiring to see. And it's actually started to dialogue with a lot of these companies where they're like, Emily, like, I did not know this was happening. And frankly, we're embarrassed that this was in our supply chain. And so how can we create greater protections for domesticated animals? So now we are working on completely new policies for them to, protect them from sites like Santorini, Greece, from Jordan, from Morocco, where we are seeing the exact same types of abuses. So, we will continue to work with travel companies until there are no exploitative animal rides in their supply chain.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is this, there is the misconception that people have when they see these kind of like, we'll call them animal experiences, that people think, oh, well, this is that person's livelihood. So they take really good care of this animal. They're so nice to it. It's like their buddy, like they're working on this together. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, they're not taking care of it. The animal is an end product to them. It's just a commodity. They're not sitting there and like petting it and I'm like, oh, it's okay, camel. I know you had a hard day. Here, let me rub your feet. Like they don't care for them in that way. And I think we as consumers and as, tourists, we don't think about that. We think, oh, they're okay. Now, what's happened in LA recently, which I'm sure you're aware of, is we had these pony rides out at Griffith Park, okay? And the community really stepped up because it had been something that was going on, let's say, I don't know, since I think the pony rides opened in the 1920s, that they had this little pony park and the kids could ride the ponies. And guess what? On Griffith Park during the summer, we frequently see temperatures over 100 degrees that they're having these animals out in. And finally, within the last 2 years, the city did shut that down, which I was so happy about because I run in Griffith Park and I would run by these areas and I would think to myself, how can you think these animals are being treated well? They look exhausted. It is hot as hell out there. And, we had a little bit of a backlash where people are like, this is nostalgia. You're taking away our memories. It's like your memory is of violence and degradation. Like you're not looking at the whole picture. So when we hear of stories, like you said, over in other countries like Jordan, and all these different places, it's not just other countries. It's here too. And I want that to be really clear to people. Like we have all kinds of roadside attractions. Thank you, Netflix, for really doing the exposés they are at this point, because people need to know these animals are not cared for. They're not being taken. They're not there by choice. And every time we go and we participate in it, we're saying, yes, this is fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly how we engage with companies. We're like, okay, consumer demand matters. I essentially like to think of a dollar spent as a vote because it directly impacts how businesses decide what they're going to sell to customers. It is simple supply and demand. So when customers buy something, that is an endorsement. They're saying, please give me more of that. And like you said, like a lot of people have this sense of nostalgia and they do have sympathy for the workers. And I think that it is an important conversation, but the fact of the matter is a lot of humans are victims of these industries too. When PETA went and investigated those camel rides at the Giza pyramids, those camels are shipped off to slaughter when they're no longer useful. And those slaughterhouses, we saw children working in them, and they were smack dab in the middle of camels getting their throats slit and bleeding out on the floor. I mean, it is child labor is against most companies' policies, and they already say, okay, that's horrific. Yeah, it is. And they're directly tied to animal industries. You see the same thing in slaughterhouses where these migrant workers are paid horrible salaries. They endure viewing abuse after abuse, and many of them have long-term psychological problems because of working in these industries. So the fact of the matter is, how do we create jobs that are better for everyone, that are better for animals, that are better for people, and don't harm anyone? So that's really the movement that we are trying to encourage companies to see. And it's like, how do we create progress for everyone? And you can. And it's just about finding alternatives that for the most part are already available. There are so many vegan food products out there. There are great vegan textiles. And of course, there are so many experiences that people can go on that don't involve an animal. So we have tons of lifestyle resources on PETA.org for people to just easily find, okay, well, what's an alternative to this experience that I used to go on? And oh, boom, there's a whole list of things that I could do that have no ties to cruelty. So yeah, it's exactly about just finding better replacements for things.
Yeah, and we're also seeing the rise of what we're calling vegan travel. In fact, we had a great vegan travel agency on the podcast recently called Veggies Abroad, and all of her travel packages and experiences are entirely vegan and based around making sure that animals are not used in any way, and they certainly, don't go to any of these experiences. But it's also showing people just, I think, a kinder and more sustainable way to travel, which really resonates with people because, again, if you're not aware of what's really going on, you think it's okay. And you mentioned the factory farming a second ago, and I wanted to touch on that because during the pandemic, that was the first time I recall in mainstream media that we started hearing about the psychological damage that was being done to the actual factory workers themselves. Because if you remember, during the pandemic, everything's shutting down. Guess what wasn't shutting down? The slaughterhouses. So
I
people
know.
who have these jobs where killing is basically their business, they were being forced to work on these assembly lines. And we started hearing in the news about the deep psychological damage that they go through just being exposed to, killing as their business, to be in this extreme level of cruelty to the point of desensitization that I just felt like I never heard before the pandemic really brought it to the forefront of like, guess what? They're being forced to work through the pandemic and guess what? It's a really, really horrible line of work that they have to do for whatever economic reasons, right? So, moving forward then, when you are really, thinking about new initiatives or ways to get other corporations involved, what's one of the first conversations you have? Because obviously profits get put before animals at all costs. So how do you start approaching corporations or businesses or begin the initiative of saying, you know what, we can do this in a different way and it's not going to hurt your bottom line. It's actually going to increase it. What does that look like?
Well, it's really about finding shared values. So take our new campaign. We are trying to get a national pizza chain to add a vegan cheese. One of the first things that we do when we reach out to these companies is say, hey, look, there is a huge market in the US for people who are avoiding dairy. Tons of people lactose intolerant, tons of people who have allergies, tons of people who just don't want to eat it because they are ethically opposed to it or they really care about the climate. And you can reach these millions of customers that you haven't tapped yet by adding this product to your line. And, we also try to be pragmatic. We acknowledge that probably some of these companies have looked into vegan cheese years before, but we say, hey, look, the market has improved significantly in just the past few years. PETA is the world's largest animal rights organization, so we're pretty well connected and we know a lot of the vegan cheese suppliers. And in fact, some of them are willing to come to your test kitchens. They are willing to help you optimize a product that is going to perform to your operational standards, that is going to be customized for your supply chain. And we also say, hey, look, a lot of your competitors are also already offering vegan cheese. There are companies like Mellow Mushroom that have it. Papa Murphy's has it. On Pizza has it. So it's really about finding what kind of a business leader cares about. And that is something that, we really try to do and engage them in these behind the scenes conversations. And if that doesn't work, then we will say, okay, hey, look, it's probably time for you to hear from directly from consumers, and we will go that public action route. So that's what we've done with Domino's, and we've launched a public campaign encouraging them to add vegan cheese because they already have it in so many other countries. It's in the UK, it's in Australia, it's in Spain. And so we're like, hey, look, there's demand for it in the US too. And it's been really great. We've gotten a lot of celebrity collaboration as well. Tabitha Brown made a post about it. Joan Jett wrote a letter to the CEO. So we're very excited about this project. And, if we don't know which national pizza chain it's going to land on, but we're pretty confident that engaging with companies in a productive way that shows, hey, PETA is here to help. We want to be a resource to you is the way to go. So we stand ready, and we're looking forward to seeing how this project unfolds.
Yeah, and honestly, some of these companies, I feel like they should welcome the I think the introduction and the change, because a lot of these national brands that you mentioned, their products suck. Like it's terrible as it is. So I'm thinking, look, you really should, maybe look into a different cheese, because the cheese you actually use really sucks. It's like plastic. It has no flavor anyway. So I don't know, make a better product is what I'm saying. But you mentioned something about the different celebrities that have been involved in this, which I always think is awesome because it brings awareness. And being in LA, and in the entertainment industry area, we hear a lot about, using what it means now to use animals in productions. So I know
Mhm.
that there's a lot of protections in place, but what is PETA doing insofar as like to make sure we're not, or is there any initiative to get these productions to not use animals at all? Because now we have things like CGI and we have, VR and things like that. Like we really don't need it. So how do we get them to even stop with the, oh, it's okay because our horses are treated humanely? Like I don't even want to see that. I don't want to see them be part of like entertainment productions.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And the landscape has really changed. So to give you some background, PETA started outreach to major film studios, to ad agencies in the early 2000s about really great apes being used for advertising, specifically baby chimpanzees, because these animals were taken from their mothers. They were violently trained. When they weren't being used for these films and productions, they were locked away in tiny cages. And when these animals grew too big, because they're huge wild animals, they were discarded at roadside zoos or other really shady facilities. And so we did a very long campaign getting the Ad Council and top ad agencies to commit to what we called the Great Ape Humane Pledge. And this was basically a giant coalition of agencies that said, hey, we will not use great apes in our productions. And today, virtually no one in Hollywood is using great apes. It's pretty much considered entirely taboo. And we've done the same work to kind of build up on, okay, other wild animals go through this exact same thing. Of course, on-set productions are, on-site, they're suffering because, things like the flashing lights of the productions, the loud crowds, all of that is really overstimulating to any animal that is brought on a film set. Like it's entirely unnatural. But a lot of this worst suffering actually happens offset because these animals are shipped to these offset training compounds where they're just living in the most deplorable conditions. Even the top trainers are constantly cited by the US Department of Agriculture for violating even the most minimum animal welfare standards. Animals are denied food, they're locked in cages stacked on top of one another, they're denied regular veterinary care, and a lot of these trainers use fear-based training methods and physical punishment to get them to comply with the tricks and the sets and all of the craziness that happens with productions. So it's been an education campaign trying to get so these advertising agencies and film studios to move away from animals. And we've been celebrating in recent years because think about one of the biggest advertising events in the world, the Super Bowl, right? And we follow it every single year and we give good awards, bad awards. And a lot of times there's really innovative and cool CGI, but then you'll see a wild animal and you're like, oh my gosh, people are still using them. But in recent years, it really has been very minimal. There have been almost no wild animals used in these national campaign ads for corporations in the last couple of years. So that has been really motivating. It's that kind of stamp that, okay, we're probably getting through at least to, these large top advertising agencies. And another shift that we have really been doing is saying, okay, let's not only look at the productions themselves, but also the marketing and the messages that we're sending around animals. A big part of that has actually been in our work around the promotions of purebred dogs in film and in TV and in advertising, because every time like a major production uses a purebred animal, just that there's this huge uptick in the purchasing of those breeds. Take 101 Dalmatians, for example. The number of puppy mills and backyard breeders that were breeding these dogs with these most horrific genetic diseases like blindness and deafness, and then later to be abandoned at shelters who are already overwhelmed. This happens time and time again. And so, one of our new outreach and education campaigns has actually been around French bulldogs and pugs, who are commonly used because a lot of people think they're really cute. They have their tongue sticking out, they have the smushed faces. And so, what we've been doing is saying, hey, look, we get that they're cute, but their smushed faces are actually a result of constricting their airways, and it makes it a daily struggle for these animals just to breathe. That's why they're constantly having that labored breathing. It's why they can't walk down the street. It's why their tongues are hanging out. And so we've actually gotten, again, the Ad Council and several top advertising agencies to say, hey, okay, we will not feature these breeds in our marketing because we don't want to add to their popularity and to their visibility of basically just promoting unhealthy dog breeds. So this has really been a big momentum that we're doing, and hopefully it will work, but we're new into the stages of this education campaign.
Yeah, and what people don't understand about those breeds is like they're bred to have those features, but it's not something like, oh, they were just born that way. It's like, yes, they were born that way because they were selectively bred to keep having those features be more pronounced over and over to the point where, they, like you said, have these little smushed faces, they can't breathe. And then we walk up, we're like, oh, it's so cute because he's snoring and he's snorting and doing things like that. It's like you said, yeah, because he literally can't breathe. Like he's not being cute. He can't take a breath. And I think that there's just, again, a huge thing that we have to get away from what we're calling like these, I don't know, they're not even status symbols, but it's like we have to understand that the animals were not supposed to be that way. Humans made that way. So yes, it's born that way, but we made them be born that way. So, again, with all the animals that are in shelters and things like that, it's like, look, go to a shelter, get one of these animals, take care of it, and then let that be the end of the line. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to breed this animal and have more because now, we had such a good experience with it. Like, let's somehow get that to die out. I have an animal companion. I have a pit bull. His name is Charlie, and I love him to death. And even with these dogs, it's like people look at him and think like he's this kind of dog. And I'm like, you don't understand. They've been bred over time to be a certain amount. People don't even understand like the amount of allergies pit bulls have. They have these big, fearsome kind of reputations, and they're really quite a gentle and let's say labor intensive dog. They have a lot of issues because again, the breeding has brought them to that place. So I think, humans really need to take up responsibility at that point and realize we have done that. That is not nature, right?
Oh, we
Um,
have 100%. And
yes,
they're breed standards a lot of the time. Like
exactly,
it's literally
exactly.
like this is what we want. We've intentionally done that, and they put their stamp of approval on it.
And like all of these international dog shows that we hear about and like, that have some status in them, they need to go too, because again, it's trying to breed these animals to be a certain way, act a certain way, trained a certain way. That is not natural to them. Now, with that said, I wanted to bring up the fact and maybe you can touch on this a little bit, is what we're calling now the no kill push in all the cities. LA, one of them, which is horrific. They do not understand what happens in reality when you set up a situation where you have a no kill shelter. So when we're talking about things like that, are there certain things that you're doing on the corporate side that is helping, businesses to understand more about initiatives like that and how they can get involved as maybe part of their own corporate responsibility?
Yeah, so for those of your listeners who don't know, PETA promotes open admission local shelters. The no kill movement, it sounds great, but what it really leads to is abandonment. There are a lot of families that cannot afford $300 or $400 vet bills to euthanize their animals. There are so many underserved communities in this country. And so they go to their local shelters and they ask for help. There are animals who are critically injured, who are dying, who are suffering from chronic diseases, and for who euthanasia is the most humane, merciful end. And what happens is no-kill shelters want to keep their euthanasia statistics looking good. So they turn these families away. And what often happens is these animals get abandoned on the side of the road. They face a much more horrific death. They get hit by a car, they get attacked by a wild animal than if they had been humanely euthanized. So we're really trying to change the narrative around this because, yes, everyone wants to see animals who are perfectly healthy find loving homes, but we are also facing an overpopulation crisis. There are quite literally millions of dogs and cats waiting for loving homes and shelters, but there are simply not enough loving homes for all of the dogs that are being pumped into the world. And where it really, really needs action is the promotion of spay and neuter. So at PETA's headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia, we do serve an underserved community in Southeast Virginia and North Carolina, and we provide things like free spay and neuter services. And it's a big, big push that we are trying to do. And on the corporate side, it's something that we talk about, especially in national pet care ads of like, okay, how can we promote things like adoption? How can we promote things like spay and neuter? Because advertising and marketing is really how so many people get reached. And so it's definitely a conversation of how can we promote what actually needs to be done to legitimately address the overpopulation crisis.
That's so true. And a lot of companies now are really focused on or trying to be more focused on sustainability and ESG goals. So, how does animal welfare fit into that conversation? Like, how do you start that conversation with businesses that, by actually changing your supply chain or changing your ingredients, you will get closer to your sustainability and ESG goals. Like, how do you bring that up to bring maybe something into their awareness that they didn't even think about? They're like, oh, I didn't even realize like we could hit our environmental goals by simply cutting out that part of what we were doing or where our supply chain was.
Well, I mean, it starts by just simply education. Animal agriculture is a leading driver of deforestation, of the climate catastrophe, of water pollution. And so, yeah, a lot of the contacts that PETA's corporate responsibility department works with are these sustainability teams at major corporations. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of companies actually have stated missions and ESG targets, and they say, okay, we want to be net zero by this year. And so a lot of times people say, hey, in order to hit that target, you need to address animal agriculture and your supply chain. But another thing that we do is we say, hey, it can't just be about the environment. It has to be about animal welfare. Animal welfare matters just as much as sustainability, especially to consumers. There are so many people who want transparent products. They want products that are kind, and they're looking to businesses to provide them with those products. And today, there are vegan alternatives to literally everything. There are vegan meats, there are vegan eggs, there are vegan dairy options, there are vegan textiles that are really, really cool and innovative. And so the products and the things that our companies can use to meet that demand are available to them. And so it's working on showing them that, hey, there are solutions out there. We can help connect you with the suppliers. And this is going to help your business in the long term because it is going to move you away from all of the reputational risk as animal agriculture comes under fire and scrutiny for all of the harm that it's bringing to the planet and to billions of animals. And it's also going to help you connect with all of these consumers who are looking for ethical products.
Definitely. And I think it's just a matter of also, getting people to open their minds and understand that just because this was the way we did something in the past doesn't mean that that's how we have to continue into the future. We sit there and try and make ourselves feel good like, oh, we're at the forefront of technology and there's CGI and there's, VR and now there is AI. It's like, yeah, let's use all of that to make the world a better place, not only for humans, but for animals too, because when you lift one up, you lift up the other, which I truly believe. And I think also just making ourselves aware in our daily choices, like you said early on, does have a huge impact. For as much as we might feel like, well, what is, because, I've had people say that, oh, you really think that by you not eating a burger, it's going to make a difference? I said, well, over my lifetime since I was 16 years old, not eating a burger, yeah, I think it made a difference. And now that I'm in a position of marketing where I can have a podcast like this and lift businesses up and lift Pete up, yeah, I think that can make a difference. So, when we're talking about just on the individual scale, what do you think that's the one or two things that a person maybe new to learning about, animal welfare and veganism? Like, where could they go? Like, what's the one or two things that they could do or read or see or maybe experience that would help them understand more that them as an individual person really does make a difference?
Yeah, I would really encourage them to go to PETA.org. We have tons of web pages that I think would be useful. We have an investigation page so they can actually just simply learn about all of the issues. A lot of people think going vegan is just about what we eat. A lot of our investigations are going to help them understand, no, it's what we wear, it's the products that we buy, it's the clothing that we wear, it's quite literally everything. I would start there. We also have lifestyle blogs that say, okay, how do I actually transition now into becoming vegan, and how do I access, alternatives? So we have tons of lifestyle blogs there. Then I would turn to PETA's victory pages, where we are constantly posting about the accomplishments that we are achieving because of compassionate consumers. And we also have what we call an action center, where literally anyone who wants to write to a corporation can, and they can take action for animals by just sending an email. And we have template letters that makes it super easy to send off, and that people can also adapt to write their personal message in, for things like for food, for entertainment, for experimentation, really anything that you're passionate about with animals. We probably have an action page to help you target a company that maybe needs an extra push. And it does. We hear from companies all the time that have maybe gone silent that, hey, okay, we've received hundreds of thousands of emails from your supporters, and let's have a conversation. And that does, it leads to change. And we have reshaped so many industries. I know it can feel that progress is slow sometimes, but also I think we need to look at how far we've actually come. I mean, think about the fur industry. When PETA first started, that was a $20 billion industry in the US alone. And it took effort. It took campaigns. It took showing up to those runway shows. It took that I'd rather go naked than wear fur ads. But it dismantled this industry. Today, is not a single really designer or major brand that is selling fur. And this is something that we have moved and shown that basically animals suffer in the exact same way for all of these other fashion industries, for things like wool, for leather, for exotic skins. And you know what? We are making change. There are hundreds of companies that have banned exotic skins. There are over 400 that have banned Angora fur, around 350 that have banned mohair. And just take Victoria's Secret. In the last week, they had their runway show. And before, they used to use over 600,000 feathers for one show alone. But PETA worked with them and convinced them to make their iconic feathers completely vegan. And that is saving so many chickens, pheasants, and ostriches that used to be used for their feathers for these shows. So it does make a difference. Quite literally, you save 200 animals a year just by eating vegan. So I think compassionate consumers need to understand change can feel slow, but you are the driver. Companies want to sell to you. So if you say, hey, I want ethical products, I want to be contributing to a kinder world, and I want you to do it, and in fact, I expect you to do it, they listen.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you said. And people just need to understand overall, if there was an animal involved in anything in the product, That animal did not willingly give up its cell, its feather, its fur, its skin. It was a horrific experience. So for anyone who thinks like, oh, well, wool isn't that bad or cashmere's not that bad, please go watch some videos readily available all over the internet so you can see how that really gets to you. But I'd like to end on a high note, Emily. You've been so awesome. Tell me personally for you, what's a recent campaign or corporate sponsorship that you are especially proud of and just lights you up when you think about it right now?
Oh my gosh. So just this month, American Airlines added vegan egg scramble. They're trialing it on their LAX to JFK flights. And I know this seems like a really, okay, it's like one small product, but this is actually huge. One, it's like the perfect moment for it. We've had all of these issues with the egg industry coming to light in the news about these supply chain shortages and the avian flu and how horrific all of these birds are just being culled and killed because, it's just the disease is rampant in these factory farms and it's horrible. So part of it is like, okay, great. Finally, a company is embracing a vegan solution and it's timely. But also, this is really building off of momentum that PETA has had to form relationships with nearly every major US airline. In fact, just before this, we worked with almost all of them to add complimentary oat milk creamer for coffee service in flights. And that's a huge thing too, because this is something that they use to welcome their guests. It's free. It's supposed to be like, hey, you're included. And now actually everyone is included because there is a option for people who don't want to perpetuate the suffering of cows on their flights. And it's really, really exciting. And I think the airline industry is a particular one that they tend to be quite cautious when introducing new products because they have very limited menus. So the fact that these large national corporations that tend to be a little hesitant are embracing all of these vegan options is a clear signal that vegan eating is mainstream, that it's here to stay, and that big businesses are investing in it.
And again, like you said, consumer demand is there. People want it. I myself want it. I mean, I haven't eaten a meal on a plane in like years because I'm always like, well, what would I eat, right? And definitely our experiences or our choices do make a difference. And I will also just mention this. It is so easy to make homemade oat milk. Like for everybody who's out there complaining about dairy prices, you can make your own milk products, people. I mean, I literally bought a machine off the internet that has changed my life. I've been making oat milk all the year and I freaking love it. And almond milk too. But that's another show, maybe. Anyway, Emily, you have been awesome. Thank you so much. You've lifted me up. I really admire what you're doing. Again, making sure that companies know that there are these alternatives out there, I really think is going to help move the needle. But also the personal choice is really, the main indicator. So people make better choices. That's all I'm going to say. PETA can help you. And with that said, Emily, please give us the website again, just for anyone who doesn't know how to spell.
Yes, please go to PETA.org, which is PETA.org.
Exactly. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. It was so great talking with you.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Party Podcast. If you're an entrepreneur or professional who would like to be on this podcast, please visit boomtownmarketing.com and click on podcast. We believe that every business has the potential to change the world for good, and we want to support our community to help make the world more ethical, compassionate, and sustainable for all future generations to come. And if you're looking to build your business, no matter what level you're at now, request your free marketing consultation at boomtownmarketing.com and click Get Started.